Alright, here I am, Mako, signing in. This is my first YouTube video. Congratulations, you made it. I made it. I haven't been doing this ever, so welcome. Me and you, we're both welcome. I am not good at this, and I am going to do my best to do a good job. It's not gonna come out very well. This is my first one. I'll probably cut this out. But I've been wanting to do this. It's kind of something I've imagined doing since I was a kid. It's very intense for me. Let me raise this. Alright, that's better-ish. I'm gonna try and bloop that out because I don't want to curse. I know YouTube probably has restrictions. I don't really know anything about that. But okay, I've been wanting to have an interview my whole life. It's kind of like my entire childhood. I imagined in the future there would be some sort of high-def interview where everyone was listening to me and everybody cared, and I would look beautiful, but I was looking at myself almost like a third person, but not third person, from your perspective basically, but not really, because I wouldn't be holding a microphone. It would be like I would be just speaking and it would reverberate through the whole system, kind of. You know, it's very cosmic. It's almost like the whole universe is watching you, and you would know exactly what to say and how to look and what you would look like. It's everything's perfectly manicured and perfect, and that's obviously happening right now. My whole life culminated in this moment. It's happening now. So, I'm Mako, signing in. Maybe you'll see me again. We'll see. I made this music. I've made a lot of music. I'm a musician. That's all I've ever wanted to be. When I was a kid, it must have freaked the teachers out. I was in elementary school, probably like second or third grade, and we had to do a biography on someone that we got to choose, and I got to choose Kurt Cobain, and I printed out a picture of his face, and I made a little stick man out of the little paper clips. They're kind of like, those were his feet and those were his hands. Little post-it notes, the little 3x5 cards. I cut out a body shape, some leg stuff, cut right down the middle for the legs, arm shapes cut out, neck, printed picture of Kurt Cobain. And this was in the early 2000s, so we didn't have all this technology you kids have. I think that probably freaked the teachers out. I mean, as much as a teacher can get freaked out, I think teachers are kind of messed up where it's like, they're all worried about their own stuff, right? They live in a cultural world outside of what we're experiencing. I just loved Nirvana. That was like the band that got me into music. Besides Aaron Carter being my first CD, because I saw a commercial on TV, and I begged my parents, I begged my mom in particular, I need to get Aaron Carter's CD, Aaron's Party, come get it. Oh my god, that's so cool. Oh, it's so sick. She said, okay, I'll go buy it. I said, no, you have to call the phone number and get the CD. You have to get it mailed. She probably spent like 20, 25, 30 bucks back in the 90s, early 2000s, buying that for me to appease my child brain, because I didn't understand that you could buy the CD at Walmart. It was huge. That was Backstreet Boys. He was the brother of a Backstreet Boy. You could buy it anywhere. But as a kid, I saw the commercial and I saw the phone number. I couldn't remember any of the numbers. If you could ask me, like, what's one number out of the phone number, I'd be like, 9, and that's it. But maybe she ordered that through the phone. Maybe she pulled a little parent prank. The things that parents do without telling their kids. Anyways, yeah, that was my first CD, but the band that got me into music was Nirvana. Nevermind. I hid the album cover because it had explicit content. Even as a kid, I understood that. But anyways, I loved it. I couldn't stop listening. It's kind of what created who I am now. I just turned 33, maybe 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, but you know, I don't know when you're watching this. Probably tomorrow, right? Yeah, Nirvana was the band that got me into music. And as a kid, having to do a biography, I couldn't think of anyone else that I wanted to do a biography on other than Kurt Cobain. I pretended to read the biography. I bought it at Barnes & Noble. It was a $30 book by Michael Azerrad, Come As You Are. It was a very good book. From about the 15 pages I read out of the 300 pages, because I was a little kid and I couldn't read much of anything. I would probably read it now if I cared. But that was what was supposed to be one of the earliest books I read, and I don't know if that's a good thing for a kid to read. Anyways, it was a huge influence on me, and I did a biography on him, and I don't know how that came off to the teachers, and you can probably find that on some very rare VHS tape that was recorded, because I remember watching that, because the close-up was me narrating this, talking about Kurt Cobain in the most abstracted, like, synopsis you could imagine. This is pre-internet, and it was just the post-it note cut up, standing like on a popsicle stick, probably, the whole thing I created with his face on it. I think it was the classic face from his Nirvana Unplugged, with the blonde hair, just and me talking about, I'm Kurt Cobain. I grew up in Aberdeen, Washington. I ended up being, and it's like, as a kid, I could never be put on the spot, kind of like now. It's very similar to what's happening now, where when you put me on the spot, I can't talk about things in a scripted format. It's very hard for me to do. But I hate scripts. It's like I can see through scripts. I hate the voice that people have when they read. I'm a very good reader, and every job I've had, it seems like everybody's illiterate. I've loved reading since I was a kid, besides that, because I couldn't read then. But the Harry Potter changed my mind. I have a very high verbal rate, something like that. It's some sort of verbal literacy, where I can read something and I can actually put emotion into it. But when I hear other people read, it's worse than hearing an AI reading, because at least an AI kind of gets the inflections right. But it's like, people seem to not comprehend what they're reading and speaking it at the same time. And I have the same problem, but every time I read, people are like, you're the reader now. Like, congratulations. Wow, this guy can read. Congratulations. Anyways, so that was my first love. Will always be my eternal love. I've grown up a lot since then, but yeah, I grew up in California. The only thing they have that's notable about that town is that I believe it's Back to the Future. They have the scene where they go to the future and it's a desolate wasteland, and that was filmed at the mall of the town that I grew up at. There was nothing there. And I didn't have friends growing up. I had maybe 2 friends I can remember. And I don't know if they remember me. We've never been in contact. They went to some birthday parties, and birthday parties back then, even as a kid, but especially now, they really don't mean anything. But back then, I was like, I don't like this. I do not enjoy having whatever this is being thrust upon. Like, what are you talking about? But I did have the Chuck E. Cheese experience. I think that is kind of the Five Nights at Freddy's experience that all these kids are having now. That's funny. It's time is cyclical. So, you know, even back in Mesopotamia, they probably brought them to some sort of Italian bread and tomato cheese ceremony as a kid. You're finally growing up. Here's what time means, supposedly, right? Right, because your age is everything, and you only turn one age every 365 days. But otherwise, you're the same age. So you could be the day before your birthday and you're whatever. That stuff sucks. So I grew up in California, and that's what this video is. This video is just me talking about my life, because that's what I do. I meet so many people and I just end up talking about my life. I guess I'm decent at talking. I never feel like that, and I definitely don't feel like that now. But that's my self-deprecating brain telling me some information that maybe isn't even construed into the outside world. It's kind of like I've always had a cosmological mind, and that's just how it goes for me. Like, whatever. I got some stuff I shouldn't even tell you guys. Maybe I'll tell you eventually. Anyways, grew up in Cali. Moved around middle school. Well, let's talk about growing up a little bit, because I don't know if this is going to be my last video. I don't know if anybody's going to watch it. Maybe I'll redo the whole thing. You know, there'll be a whole remastered, remix, so to speak. So I'll overdub the whole thing with a high quality microphone. Images will flash in front of the screen. Not knowing, you know, I watch a lot of YouTube. I told you I'm unemployed right now. Images will flash in front of the screen because we gotta keep it entertaining, right? It's always been like that. Okay, growing up, I have an older brother who's 10 years older than me. He went to the Iraq War. He moved out when he was about 18 and I was like 8 years old. So I grew up with all his stuff. And I never realized that he took all the stuff he cared about with him, besides his computer. You can't take a computer, you can't take a desk or a bed. He had the glow stars on the ceiling and the lightning ball that you could plug in and turn on and touch, and the light would go right to your finger. That's some 90s stuff that a lot of kids probably don't know about. He took all of his CDs with him, but he left a blank CD case, or a stack of blank CDs. You remember, with the like nylon outside where it's just a cylinder to keep the dust from getting on it, because we really had to care about dust back then. We don't have to care about dust anymore. Dusting is a privilege. You know, you could buy a duster and dust everything in your house, but it doesn't affect the data that you have. On the top of that CD stack inside of that cylinder with the dust protector was Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish. I listened to that on my CD player nonstop. That was like discovering a whole new world. Let alone it was just cursing, but I was obsessed with The Matrix as a kid too. That blew my mind, and it's tied completely to it. It was like listening to that CD as a kid is being Neo, having a bug thrown into your stomach, into your belly button, having your humanity just kind of ripped away, and understanding what the world is really about. Turns out, the only reason I experienced that CD was because my older brother thought it was not worth bringing to the Iraq War. Love him. I kind of, you know what, maybe I especially love him for giving me that experience. I told him that recently, actually. He never understood that I grew up with a lot of the things that he left behind. I had a PS1 with a mushroom sticker on the top of the PS1, where when you open it, it goes, there's a mushroom sticker on top. And I had Final Fantasy VII. Unbelievable game, blew my mind, still influences me to this day, comes into my mind very frequently. Never had the third disc. I don't know how it ends. I've never beat it. But anyways, Nirvana was... So I never understood... Okay, maybe not understood, but I never knew what the cover of Chocolate Starfish looks like. I learned about that maybe mid-20s. I saw the cover of Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish, and I was utterly disgusted. That is a disgusting album cover. I'm glad I only ever saw the CD cover, because it's just like 5 dudes who are like sucking their thumbs in a circle. That's cool. Whatever's going on the album cover is not where it's at. That is not good. And I saw them like 2 years ago, and I knew every word to every song they played, including like the one song they played from their last album. It was something about being a dad. Like, I'm a stupid dad, I'm a fat dad. I was like, yeah, even this song kind of goes. And it was awesome. But yeah, so that's my older brother. Big influence on my childhood. I also grew up with I guess you would call it a CRT TV. It was a box TV. And that was in the corner of the room. These kids and me, an iPhone has a higher definition than what I would see from the corner of the room while I'm going to bed, tucked in, laying on the pillow, watching Dragon Ball in the middle of the night. I loved anime since I was a kid, and it was always Dragon Ball. It was always, I'm this little monkey kid with a tail too. Master Roshi was my grandpa, and it taught me everything about what being a human is about. It's just, it made sense. I watched some Dragon Ball Z, but Dragon Ball was where it's at as a kid. Except for like when I was a really early kid, I was like a Barney kid. I watched Charlotte's Web. My mom wanted to bring me to Barney, the live show, the opera, so to speak, the kids' opera, where I would have been, I'm not going to sing that. I don't know how YouTube goes. Copyrights and stuff like that. Barney was awesome. Honestly, I think Barney is still awesome. If I watched it right now, I would probably love it. Including Bananas in Pajamas, also awesome. Power Rangers, but I had VHS tapes. Beetleborgs. I had like probably only one Beetleborgs tape, and I would watch it religiously. And that's probably why I started getting bugs tattooed all over me. But that's besides the point. Power Rangers, loved it. I always only empathized with the main character. That is a sort of disturbing psychological thing you can probably dissect. but I've probably had main character syndrome since the 90s, since before any of this stuff seemed to happen, you know? Whatever postmodern hellhole we're living in now, I had that. I was raised in front of a TV. I'm talking about my childhood. It's California. This was California as a kid. You don't have friends, you have a TV. I remember the NES system with the duck hunt, with the gun. Some of the earliest memories of me trying to figure something out, which is really what a brain is all about. A brain just tries to figure things out, right? Well, I was a little kid put into a room with no one else in the house, and an NES, maybe an SNES, maybe an N64, maybe a PS1, probably up to PS2. Imagine a little kid, like an 8-year-old, trying to figure out how to hook up a DDR mat, Dance Dance Revolution mat, to a game system, and I was trying to play the games, pushing my little feet, my little baby feet, my little kid feet on the mat, trying to figure this stuff out. Meanwhile, the TV, which was on top of like a really high shelf that I couldn't quite reach, with the system plugged in, only showed a blue screen with probably like the wrong input showing in the corner, with the classic, analog input 1, whatever, stuff like that. Like, that was my childhood. Talking about childhood memories and first memories, I believe my first memory, so to speak, my first moment of self-awareness was playing Pokemon. I don't know if it was red or blue. I think it was blue, and I probably wanted red. And I was a little kid, maybe 6 years old, and it was some sort of holiday where we had a ton of extended family members, because family members is like, what are you talking about? You're talking about like 5 people. My little brother, me, my older brother was not there. He was in Iraq. My mother and my father. Everyone else was a strange entity. And I had an aunt who lived across the street her whole life. She always lived with her parents, which were my grandparents lived across the street. I remember my grandmother's garden, she grew mint, and my little brother told me that he would be given Flintstone vitamins every morning, and he wouldn't want to eat them, so he would pretend to eat them, and he would spit them out in the garden. And our grandma walked out to the garden one day, and she just found a ton of Flintstone mints just all over the place, like in this one spot, because kids aren't very smart. They're not going to bury them. They're not going to put them all over the place. It was all just compiled in one spot, probably right next to the little baby, the little cherub, taking a little pee constantly, forever. She just found a whole pile of Flintstone vitamins. But anyways, my first self-awareness moment, I believe, one of my earliest memories at least, was being a kid playing Game Boy Color, the yellow one, and I had Pokemon, and I had saved just before the Elite Four, and I had a whole leveled up crew, but I've been replaying Pokemon. Happy 30th anniversary, everybody. Yeah, I'm in that too. God, I hate how postmodern I am, but I am talking into a little microphone, into a YouTube video that hopefully I'll post, because I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Little kid playing Game Boy Color, and I saved right before the Elite Four, and I've always, up to now, I'm still the same way. I would only have like 2 Pokemon that are just super over leveled. Like, forget having a full rounded team. Everybody's like level 40. I'm like level 60 Charizard, level 60 Pikachu, whatever. And then everybody else, it's like, hopefully they don't do a roar and bring some other stuff back. It's like, I can't think that complexly. So I'm just gonna like brute force it. And as a kid, I was playing this while this whole holiday thing was going on around me. There was like a poinsettia on a glass table with the metal footing, very blossomy underneath, just plain glass on top, poinsettia, and some sort of lamp. Back when we had lampshades back then. I don't know if you guys have lampshades now. They were a big deal. And I was playing this, avoiding everybody, and I had this moment of self-reflection where I was like, oh, and this was before they had light-up screens. I had to play it in the lampshade, underneath the lampshade, to be able to see what was going on this like TI-87 calculator looking device. And I was right before the Elite Four with super overleveled Pokemon. And it was like I saved right before that to be able to re-experience beating the Elite Four over and over again, including Gary. Hold on, give me a second. This is just a personal little thing. Including Gary, because, you know, Gary is basically the elite. It should be an Elite 5. I couldn't remember any of that stuff. I had this moment where I was like, what the hell is this? I couldn't remember all of the lead up to the Elite Four. I couldn't remember. I watched the Pokemon anime, but like I understood the mechanics of how Pokemon worked, but the lead up, like maybe I could remember the first 3 gym leaders, but that was it, and that was a vague memory, and I was like, what the hell is going on? It's basically like my first post-nut clarity, where it's like I reached the point of orgasm, and as a little kid, I was like saving right before the Elite Four with these super advanced Pokemon to be able to keep doing that over and over again as if that was the only point. I could have restarted the game, but there was no point in that. The whole point was to reach the end and keep experiencing that over and over and over. And that was the moment where maybe it was the first time I ever did it, and my little child brain couldn't understand what was going on. But yeah, I think that was my first orgasm, probably at like 6 to 8 years old. And then my first come down, so to speak. I felt the cold shivers, and I felt all my skin on my body, and I understood that I was born naked and I have to wear clothes for the rest of my life, like Adam. But yeah, so that was Pokemon. That was California. Let's keep going on California, you know? I'm having fun. My mother would drive me to work on Saturdays. She would have work on Saturdays, and she worked for the California Water Company, Golden State Water Company. And she would bring me, not my little brother, he was too young. I don't know what the hell he was doing. I don't know what my dad was doing. Maybe he was spending time with my little brother. I don't know. Doing whatever, watching cartoons. Dragon Ball Z was airing on Saturday mornings, so I would try to watch that, but I was a cranky little kid, and I didn't want to get dragged to work with my mom on a Saturday, because I was going to school, which is like the beginning of the prison system. It's like, oh yeah, get used to this. Get used to the whole 9 to 5 kid, including Saturdays now. And she would bring me to the water company, and she would be the only one working on Saturday. It would take a half-hour drive to get there, which felt like forever as a kid. And we'd be driving in the fog, and that blew my mind. She would be listening to the AM radio, Golden Oldies. So I have a soft spot for Smokey Robinson and the Supremes. Oh, that was my mother's favorite music. I still love it to death. As a little kid, my favorite song was Under the Boardwalk. Great song, The Drifters. You should listen to it. You'll hear it at Pete's Fish and Chips. If you go to Pete's Fish and Chips, it'll be the Beach Boys and Under the Boardwalk. So we would drive there, but before that, we would start right around the corner from our house. We would drive around a wooden fence, and it was always a dark brown. I'm sure it's still the same shade of dark brown, still always wet, even though it didn't rain. I learned going back maybe 10 years ago, that was the last time I visited California when my grandparents passed away and they were selling the house, and an Asian family was living in my childhood home. I think multiple families. That a Filipino girl gang threw a dead body over that fence. It was always overgrown, even as a kid. It had a huge tree hanging over that perpetually damp fence. And of course, that's a perfect place to throw a dead body. Like, come on. I mean, I grew up around stuff like that. I was chased down the street as a kid, walking down weird concrete walkways, going to and from elementary school. One time, my little brother was walking with us, and he's 4 years younger than me. And he swore that he had to piss. And me and the neighbor, who was like a little younger than me, kind of in between our ages, he was walking with me, and my little brother, he took a stand. This was like the bravest thing he'd ever done at the time. He said, "I have to piss. I have to pee." Little kids don't say piss. And we were like, "No, you don't. Come on." He was like, "Oh yeah? I'll prove it." And he just stood there, and we were watching him. It's like we were walking home from school. There's a perpetual motion. And he was like, "Oh yeah? Watch this." We both turned around, stopped, and he just stood there, and he pissed his pants in authority. It was like an authoritative piss. And we just watched that water spread down his probably light blue jeans, the not bleached, but just light blue down. And we were like, we took a second and we just, "Oh my God, are you?" And we booked it. We booked it back to the house. We ran straight. And that's like, I was a chubby kid. I was out of breath, but I did not stop running. And my neighbor went to his house. I went to mine. My little brother walked with pissed pants all the way home. That was probably half a mile down that street. On the sidewalk with the cracks and the weeds growing through them and stuff like that. And that was embarrassing for him. But yeah, so my mom would drive me to work on Saturdays, and before going to work, we would stop at Winchell's Donuts. And as a kid, I was like, the only donut that's worth getting, the only donut that makes sense, is the maple glaze bar. I didn't call it that. I was like, the maybe maple bar, but I only knew what it looked like. I was just like, that's the one. Sometimes the sugar twist, but like regular donuts just didn't make sense. I was like, I can't Like, what? Are you kidding me? This isn't a donut. This is... Are you kidding me? Yeah. So we would get that maple bar. I don't know. I think I would be sitting in the car, driving through the fog, listening to the radio, not eating the donut. It would be sitting there because once I get to work, I wouldn't have anything to do for like 8 hours. So I could eat the donut in the lunchroom, which didn't have anybody there, and had a soda machine. Sometimes I would get, I loved root beer as a kid. That was my stuff. Like, that was my elixir. I was like, this is holy water. And my mom loved Diet Coke. It was always Diet Coke. That was all she drank. Besides Coors Light when she got home with my dad. And the Corona and Lime, that was my dad's drink. But the Coors Lights were the thing. And I would be drinking the root beer, and it's like, I guess I was happy, but I was a little kid, and even as a little kid, I was not eating right, and I would take the worst poops. Like, they were a struggle as a kid, poop. Like, that kind of messed me up for a long time. My diet, being forced to have whatever your parents feed you as a kid, all the way up to like a teenager and stuff like that, like, that really messed my gut up. I was always like perpetually constipated. I mean, I ate a donut when I got to work, and it's like, cool, I get this little sugar rush, and then I'm sitting in like the liminal space backroom stuff. Like, I grew up with that every Saturday. These kids hopefully don't have to deal with that stuff, but like, I grew up in that stuff. It's like I was going to school, and I was like a decent little kid, but like every Saturday was entering the back rooms. This huge water company, and my mom was the only one working in a cubicle with the little post-it boards, like the gray cubicles, the thin walls about this thick, where every single wall you could just post on it. Like, you could put a tack in and put pictures up and stuff like that. They weren't walls. They were boards. She was working, and I would just wander around, and I had access to the internet. And what probably messed me up as a kid, I was probably like 11 years old, maybe 10. And I learned about it because my parents were like, we're going to get your older brother something. He was in the Army by now. I hadn't seen him in a while. It was like, let's get him something for a present. And we passed by the video game section at Costco back when it was a PS2. Maybe the Xbox had just come out, but we had a PS2. And I was like, that looks cool. And it was the greatest hits edition of Silent Hill 2. I never played it, but for some reason, I was drawn to it. And as a little kid, even though I never played it, I learned about it, and I printed out off of GameFAQs, FAQS.com, this person named President Evil uploaded a story analysis of Silent Hill 2. I printed out like 50 pages of a plot analysis of that game, and that was like with the company printer, and my mom was like, okay, but this is the only thing you can print. It's and she didn't know what I was printing and stuff like that, and I would basically be in a liminal backrooms space as a little kid. I was probably like this tall, like 4'5" maybe, and I would probably crawl under a desk that wasn't being used, and I would just read. But you know what? I think I spent time in the printer room. It's like it got printed, and the paper was still warm, and it felt like that warmth wouldn't leave it. Like, if you felt that warmth when the printer paper, it was like 50 pages, but that felt like a freaking novel as a little kid. And when you felt the warmth, it felt like if you felt that at the beginning, it would never leave. It's like it was a part of you now. And I think I stapled it. I don't even know if I stapled it. It was that thick. I think maybe I tried to staple it and it got messed up. Because the regular stapler wouldn't work for that. But I was obsessed with that, and I read all of the multiple endings. And ever since then, that really messed me up for a long time, thinking that I was... Well, this is the Silent Hill 1 thing, I think, but I was like, I'm probably in a coma, in a car crash, experiencing my whole life in reverse. And this is like a 10-year-old thinking this stuff in this giant warehouse that's completely empty. Maybe drinking some root beer and hopefully having some leftover donut holes to munch on as a snack, because my mom bought those too. And I would do that a lot, like every weekend. But yeah, so that was California. My dad had a company with his dad. He owned an electrical company, and that was very successful. My dad worked on, I'll talk about all that stuff another time, my dad's work and who my dad is. But basically, we moved to my parents' vacation house when I had just entered middle school. And I was not a good student. I remember in 6th grade, I got my only D I think I ever got in my entire life. And I don't remember what class it was in, but that D really messed me up. And I was hanging out with this kid named and that kid was like a strung out little kid. This kid looked like he was from a junkie home and he was already hooked on drugs. And I was like, this kid is not good, but I was like, that was my only friend, really. He wasn't even someone who I would invite to like birthday parties. That was my real friend at school. And I was like, I got a D, and I cried when my parents got the report card. And I didn't know why I was crying, and they weren't mad at me or anything, but I was like, I'll make it up. And somehow I got into dual enrollment AP classes after that. So I did spend one middle school. It was like 5th grade, but in California, I think it was middle school still. And my first semester there, I stopped hanging out with Anthony. I kind of kept to myself. I did have some friends, but it was like I was a bug in like a military academy. And I did well in science, which was dual enrollment, I believe, or AP. And I got good grades from then on out. My parents moved to their vacation house in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. It's like a vacation house, vacation town. There's nothing there besides parties, I guess. When I was in middle school, and I guess this is we'll get into it. This will be a long video. But you know, might be my only video, so who cares? Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Had to restart my whole life. My parents didn't care about that. We would be visiting there every now and then, and it was a 3-hour drive, maybe 4 or 5 actually, from California to there. And that was a hell of a trip as a little kid. It was in a Hummer, and we had TV screens on the seats behind the drivers and the passenger seats, and they had a DVD player, and we would only rewatch basically Kangaroo Jack, maybe See Spot Run, every trip we'd make down there, and it was hell. And we would go on my parents' speedboat. HTM has flames on it. It's pretty cool. My dad still has it. And I would hate it every time. It's like by then I had a Game Boy Advance SP, and if we went on the lake, I wouldn't want to go out in the sun. I'm a pasty little white boy. I would turn red, and I would hang out in the engine. There on the boat, there's like this little engine cabinet that pops up, and I would just hang out in there and play my Game Boy right next to the engine while everybody was parked in the sand lot. Lots of girls with their things out, and that's where I learned about well, that's not where I learned about sex, but that's where I learned about women, real women, I guess. It's like you would throw beads at them and they would show you their boobs. That kind of, as a kid, I was like, I don't get this. I don't like this. This is weird. But we'll get into all that in another video too. You know what? This has gone on long enough. I'll keep it there. That's basically my upbringing in California. I'll probably talk more about that if I keep doing this type of stuff. But this is a decent little talk. Thank you. Mako signing out. Later.